So we are going to be starting with grade 12 inverse functions. Now before we start with inverse functions, we have to know what is a function. What's the definition of a function? A function is something where there's one x value and it correlates to exactly one y value. This is known as a function. Now, so they have more than one x value that correlates, or x values that correlates to one y value. Examples of functions or true functions is a straight line. Everywhere where I test using the straight line test, I can see that for every x value there is one y value. Another one that is actually a function is my parabola, because you only touch it once if you draw a vertical line. Another example, hyperbola. Exception of my asymptotes, I only have one point where it crosses. What about the following? Is that a true function? Okay. So if I draw a vertical line, it touches the graph more than once. So therefore, for each x value, I will have two y values. And this will not be a real function. Another example. If I have a parabola that's on its side, is this a function? No. Why? Because if I do my vertical line test, touches twice. What about this? The function y. So what's the difference between this function and that function? I impose a limit. I say, but it cannot be, y cannot be smaller than 0. So in order to get more than one or just the one function, I impose a limit. I say, but this can only exist where y is larger than 0 or smaller than 0. In this case, y is larger than 0. That's my limit. Hello? So this only exists where y is larger than 0. Or equals to 0. Okay. So now that we know what is a function, we can continue to inverse functions. So, what happens with the inverse function? It's simply put, y becomes x and x becomes y. So if I want an inverse function, for example, if I have y equals to mx plus c, what happens to my inverse function? My inverse function can also be denoted as f of -1. I can say, but these two must swap places. So x equals to my plus c. What do? I have to solve for y. So I get everything over. It's going to be x minus c equals to my. So therefore y will become x minus c divided by m. So that's the inverse of it. Now, usually in grade 12, they do not give you something that's more difficult than the following. Ax squared. So if I find the inverse of this, let's say, call this g of x. So if I find the inverse of g of x, it means that it will be x equals to ay squared. What do I have to do? I have to solve for y. So easy way to do that. Y is equals to plus minus square root of x over a. So, what limit must happen here? Because there's a plus minus. Can y be plus or minus something? No, it's going to fail my vertical line test. So if I take this for example, and I was to draw it, originally this first one was a parabola that goes there. My other one will be a parabola that exists here. Is that a graph? No. Or it's not a function. Why? Because it fails my straight line test. So therefore, we impose a limit. We either say but y will be positive, or we say that y will be negative of that value. Otherwise, it will not be a function. You should indicate that in, so usually when you do it, you do plus minus, but they will say that y is positive or y is negative. Now, another one. We've done these though. Y equals to b to the power of x. What will be the inverse of this? I will have x equals to b to the power of y. But we have done something in order to solve this. We call it a log. Now what do I know? My logarithm will be my base, and on this side I will have my value. So in this case, if I was to change this to a logarithmic function, it will become y equals to log of b of x. Okay, these are inverse functions. What we are going to be focusing on today is whether it is a function, changing it into a function, or the inverse of that function, and that will be mainly it. So what happens if I have a function? So what happens if I have a coordinate? Let's say I've got 3 and 5. And this is for f. So for the function of f. If I want to get inverse of f, what will be that same coordinate? What happens with an inverse function? Y and x. So in this case, it will be 5 and 3. So this is inverses. Only thing that happens is x and y swaps. Now, for those of you that will be keen-eyed with the graphs, you will see that this is the line of x equals to, and this is also the line where everything reflects. So, for example, my parabola that used to be here, it flips over and lies. If I have an exponential graph that goes like this, if it flips over where x is equals to y, it will become a logarithmic function that goes there. So it flips over this line. Yep. So it jumps over and reflects. If you have a negative value, okay. So let's say this graph also has, let's say, -2 and 5. What happens there? Is that your question? No. The signs do not stay. Everything swaps. So both the sign and everything swaps. Okay. Any questions? We're going to have a small exercise to do in class.